before. There was we had some technical difficulties. I have a serious gremlin infestation here. But on my end, we were not picking up Raul, and so you out in the audience were not able to hear him. So we have hopefully fixed that problem. And but if there are any audio issues or video issues or anything like that, please let me know. So I am going to now turn it over to Raul, and he can introduce himself. So take it away, Raul.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Raul Anthony. I am a reverend in the Church of Satan. I'm also the technical director for Radio Free Satan, which is a network of podcasts by members of the Church of Satan. I'm also a writer and podcaster for Heathen Harvest. And I also do my own audio music recording as Anarch. And I, in general, do representation of Satanism in the media, and on podcasts and on radio for TV and blogs. I do this because it's fun. I find it interesting to meet other people who are interested in Satanism and have questions about it. Well, generally, if they're intelligent questions. But this has been a good time here on this show. This is our third attempt here. So, this is our second show, third attempt. Right. But we've been having a lot of fun, getting a lot of good questions from people. So I like doing this kind of stuff.
Well, thank you, Raul. I really appreciate your patience with me.
You're welcome.
So we were having so earlier we were talking about a philosophy, the satanic philosophy, and how people sort of if they resonate with it, they kind of from what I was hearing you say, it sounds like people sort of take these principles into their own philosophy. So it's kind of like they more or less resonate with the philosophies rather than changing their philosophy or their outlook to fit Satanism, which I think is the wrong way to go about it. I think you should resonate with something rather than trying to force yourself to resonate with something.
Yeah, generally the way we see our statements, sins, rules, and things like that is general litmus test to see how compatible Satanism is with you. And ideally, as a Satanist, you come to it as a kind of realization. You recognize these things within you. But for some people, it may not be immediately apparent, and maybe coming to Satanism might break some dogmas, and over time they become more aware of themselves and they resonate more with the philosophy. I try not to discount people's experiences and perspectives outright. I can speak about my experiences, my perspectives, and those that I know and interact with, but a lot of people come to Satanism from all different kinds of angles and perspectives, and what's interesting about Satanism to me is that people come at it from different perspectives. They get to Satanism, which has a bedrock fundamental philosophy and its own dogmas, but then they also then disperse. So I kind of see it as like many in, many out kind of perspective. People come from it from different points of views. They learn about Satanism, and Satanism gives them these tools that can then spread out and apply in a variety of different ways.
And so I just sent you the new link. So that is the link to our new stream here, and I am getting feedback from people in the chat room. They're saying perfect. So it sounds like the audio issue was fixed. So if
great.
not, please let us know, and we'll see what we can do here. We may have to sacrifice a virgin. So if there are any virgins out there, I'm obviously just kidding. But yeah, because because I like that. And we were also sort of talking about kind of how there's sort of maybe the dogma from other religions that people may kind of bring with them into Satanism, and how I mean, what I'm trying to do is trying to segue into what we were talking about earlier about the Black Mass, and how I think a lot of people have a different perspective of that. I think that some people, especially the Christian right, they use that as like they corrupt it, they twist it into their own kind of interpretation of what it is, and they think that you desecrate a church, and you whatever I could go on about what they think you do, but what I'd actually like to hear from you is what it actually is. And also, you had mentioned something about a satanic mass, and maybe what you could do is talk about both of those and maybe kind of contrast and compare those.
Sure. I mean, those are good questions. And obviously the Black Mass is something that has a bit of a history. La Messe Noire, my terrible French pronunciation. But there's a history of the Black Mass. It's a blasphemous, very, just powerful ritual that's meant to, from a satanic perspective, it's meant to break any bonds you may have with some kind of controlling dogma. And for many people in the West, it's Christianity, being raised a Christian or in a Christian kind of upbringing generally. Those kinds of things may still have a hold on you psychologically. So you may want to perform a Black Mass that will symbolically destroy that. And you do that through these really actually horrendous acts. Like they would be just great acts of blasphemy and symbolism, defecation on religious holy sacred items, just anything that is extreme in a way that breaks that baggage in your mind. Now that's why it's got so much notoriety around it, because it's so extreme. It can be so extreme. So a lot of people are attracted to the idea of a Black Mass, nude nuns and upside down crosses and very vulgar, rude proclamations against Christianity or whatever religion. And so people are attracted to that. But there is an actual basis for it. It's not just for fun. That's the thing. The Black Mass is not necessarily supposed to be something you do for fun or you do on a regular basis. If you're doing this on a regular basis, something's not working, right? The whole point of it is to break those bonds so you can say, I am through with Christianity or whatever it is you're performing a Black Mass against. Actually, LaVey noted that there may be a point where the Black Mass, as it's understood, is no longer necessary. I mean, as Christianity, as a spiritual dogma starts to decline, well, maybe something else is a more fitting dogma, whether it's egalitarianism or some kind of political environment, fascism, communism, whatever, liberalism, whatever it is that you feel like is extreme liberalism, but anything that would be a burden to you. I mean, LaVey even talked about like extreme feminism as like a possible target for that, and whatever it is personally for you. I mean, it could be, if you are in a communist dictatorship and that's something you want to break free, well, the Black Mass could be targeted to attack communism. And, so that it's very flexible. It's based to target whatever it is that's holding you down. And then there's a satanic mass, and a satanic mass is a little different because a satanic mass is more of a formal recognition of a certain event or a certain milestone. It's pretty flexible on what that can be. But generally, a satanic mass is just a gathering of Satanists that focus on a particular goal or a particular event to recognize it. We've had satanic masses on 666, June 6th, 2006. So that we did a satanic mass. The Church of Satan did a satanic mass to recognize that day, but not so much to celebrate it, but to kind of poke fun at it. Because really, the 666 is not that big of a deal in Satanism. We're not
right.
superstitious like that. But we understand that we recognize that there's power in that number, and there was a lot of drama on that day around that number. So we took advantage of that. We also had a satanic mass on both the 50th anniversary of the Church of Satan, and also to ring in the 50th year. So on the 49th year, and then on the 50th year, to kind of bookend the 50 years of the Church of Satan, we did satanic masses. And there's also been other satanic masses at the Hellfire Caves in England. Mm-hmm. There have been other more smaller gatherings of satanic ritual amongst Church of Satan members to acknowledge accomplishments or milestones in life. So that's generally the differences. Black Mass is a very, very specific thing. It's meant to destroy kind of psychological bondage to an idea. And Satanic Mass is more of a recognition of an event.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I like that I like that concept of breaking dogma, because I think that any dogma can go to an extreme, and when it goes mm-hmm. to that extreme, it almost, I've heard it described almost like a horse shoe. And so what it is there you have the both extremes of anything, and it becomes basically kind of what it was going against. It almost becomes totalitarian in its own desire to become freeing or liberating, and instead it actually creates the other. And it's not the fault of the ideology; it's the fault of those who hold it, the ideologues within it, that take it to such an extreme, you know. And I think that is kind of cropping up a little bit today. And I think that it's good to be able to recognize that and smash it when it becomes to point where it is something that needs to be destroyed. Like, I mean, that's kind of like, that was the imagery that was coming to my mind when you're talking about a black mass. It's almost like destroying that ideology and allowing it to kind of dissolve, and then, you know, letting whatever filling that space recreate itself. Would that be a good way of describing it?
Yeah, and keep in mind this is a subjective thing. You know, it's for the practitioner, for the Satanist that's doing it. This is subjective to their experience, to their background, and you are essentially destroying that. And what you're filling it in is with your ego, with yourself, with you as God. It's like you are no longer in bondage to this other idea. You are now sovereign, and you are in control of your destiny going forward from that point. So, I mean, that is the major goal of the Black Mass. You know, so again, you know, if you're doing a Black Mass every weekend, you're doing something wrong.
You may need to destroy that.
Yeah, you may need a Black Mass against Black Masses. I don't know.
Then you kind of get into, what is it, the inception of a Black Mass.
Yeah, we got to go deeper. Yeah. Maybe just try having fun. I don't know.
Yeah, really, exactly. Okay, and then it's interesting that you had mentioned the power of some of the symbolism, like the 666, or some other things that I believe that some extremists don't quite understand about Satanism, occultism, and, you know, people who just practice. I don't know of a good term to describe it, but just people who practice maybe new thought or new ideas or new religions or spirituality or ways of looking at the world, but they almost project these symbols onto us. And so then when we receive that, there's two ways we can do it. One is we can use it to our advantage and kind of throw it in their face and say, okay, so you believe this, so okay, we'll do it that way, kind of like with the 666. And then there's the other end where you can kind of like say, no, actually that's not. That is your perception of it. 666 to us doesn't really have any meaning, and it's just three numbers to us. If anything, maybe 777 or 333, but 666, no, it doesn't really mean anything to us. So I like that concept of it does seem kind of like Satanism to me, my perspective of it. It seems like it's kind of taking that sort of pretty dolled up status quo and sort of throwing it in the face of those who really perpetuate it. Would that be a good way? Kind of like almost like a mocking it, but not necessarily in a way of in a kind of joking way. Mocking it and making fun of it at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big defense mechanism is humor and comedy. And a lot of people get through struggles in their life through comedy, because it's a powerful tool. It's very human. And in a way, the Black Mass could be a comedy, could be a satire of Christianity or whatever it is the target is. So that's absolutely, a valid, exercise in a Black Mass.
So let's see here. Let's see. So it looks like everything's good in the chat here. And we will be taking questions, so if any of you guys have any questions that you'd like us to answer, just go ahead and throw them in there. I think we're at a point where we can just take questions kind of on the fly. Let me see.
Try me.
Yeah, what'd you say?
Yeah, it's a try me. No, I'm kidding.
So the other thing, so I think you kind of touched on the 9 satanic statements, and I think we had the problem before when we were getting it, or actually when we found out we were having the audio issue. We were talking about the 11 rules of the earth. Could you kind of encapsulate those for us?
Oh, yeah. So the 11 rules of the earth are generally guidelines for how to maneuver the world as a Satanist. And these are just pretty basic principles. I mean, they're based on the idea of Satanism being an individualistic, almost like alienating philosophy. I don't want to say alienating, but you are, as a Satanist, an alien in a way. You are different from the masses. You are not like most. So, but you still have to interact with other people. You still have to navigate the world. You still are a social animal. Humans are social animals. So this is just a general guideline of how to go about the world. And in a way, this should be kind of common sense to a Satanist. But it does kind of lay it out for non-Satanists to see. It's like, okay, well, what can we expect for Satanists to do, and what can they be like? And it also dispels notions of Satanists being these child killers, these animal killers, and things like that. So there's usefulness in that as well. But it all boils down to the philosophy. All of these statements and rules, they can all navigate back to the principles of Satanism. So you've got things like do not give opinions or advice unless you're asked, or do not tell your troubles to others unless you're sure you want to hear them. Well, as an individual, you don't want to impose on others, essentially, and also you don't want others imposing on you. So that's generally the idea behind that. When you're in another's layer, show them respect. In the same way it also goes vice versa. When someone is in your layer, they should treat you with respect, and if they annoy you, well, they are open to being treated cruelly or without mercy. And I think people get hung up on that. They think, well, if somebody tells a bad joke in your house and annoys you, you're gonna whip them up. And like, no, have some common sense, be rational about it. You may tell them to stop. If they continue to be annoying, if they escalate, well, maybe you may need to remove them from the household, right, or something like that. Use your best judgment, but that's actually asking a lot from people nowadays. So, but that's generally the idea. This is a big one. Do not make sexual advances unless you're giving the mating signal. And it's interesting because as women tend to get this, they got it. They immediately get this. And a lot of guys, although some guys, they don't get it. It's like, what's the mating signal? What's this? And they want to come at it as a science when it's not. It's more of an art, and it's a dance. The mating, the dating, romance, sex, all of that is there's in a handbook. Well, there are plenty of people selling handbooks, and whether they work or not, that's a different story. But
exactly. Yeah.
But have some common sense to situations and recognize there will be situations where your advances are not warranted or were not returned, and you may need to you will need to back away at that situation because as a Satanist too, you want to consider the other person's sovereignty, and you also want to think long term. What are the consequences of doing these kinds of things, both socially, morally, legally, ethically, things like that. You want to think many steps ahead, and just treat people with respect. And in terms of giving them getting the mating signal, well, if a guy or a girl is winking at you or looking at you at the bar, you may want to go talk to them. This is kind of general social interaction using lesser magic. It's a very important satanic tool. In many ways, it won't be obvious to some people, but not everyone's a Satanist, so that's something to keep in mind. And then you've got some other things here like do not take which does not belong to you unless it's a burden to others. And this is kind of leaving things vague in a way that some people some people, there's natural predator-prey situations in the world. And as Satanists, you're not always a good guy. You're not always, you are like the shark in the ocean. Whether you are, doing what you do, out of some moral goodness is not, that may not be the case. That may not be subjective to you. It may not matter. Some people might see you as a good person. Other people might not see you as a good person. But so this is kind of vagueness kind of touches on that more advanced application of Satanism, in a way that, but it also recognizes that we do have a social contract. We do have a social contract. You don't want to do things that are going to be a burden on you in the long term. You don't want to get arrested. You want to be a thief and get arrested, and that's not very liberating. There's not a lot of sovereignty in jail. But there are some situations where whether it be financial or in it's hard to pinpoint, but because it's a complex world out there. But it kind of gives that kind of vagueness that Satanism almost thrives in some ways. LaVey liked to say, well, Satanism is like a custard on a wall. It's hard to nail down. It is vague in some ways, but it's very direct in other ways, and there's fun in that mystery. And then you've got the power of magic, and that's the big thing, is acknowledging magic, and that's again leading into that kind of vagueness of, well, what is magic and what is satanic magic and how does that work? And I can write very, very long articles on that, and we can go into a whole conversation about satanic magic, but it is both a psychological phenomenon that's subjective, and it could be something more. But if it works for you, for whatever it is, acknowledge it. If it doesn't work for you, if you don't care for it, well, move along. You can move along just fine. There's plenty of Satanists that have no interest in magic, and don't feel like it's beneficial for them in their life, and that's completely fine. It's just saying that if it works for you, acknowledge it, make use of it. And some big things here is do not harm little children and do not kill non-human animals unless you're attacked or for your food. And that's big. That's pretty major. And some people think that that's put in here just to cover our butts in a way. And trust me, like what I was trying to get at earlier with the whole thievery kind of rule is that no, we're not interested in covering our butts and being good guys. We're not. That's not the point. It's this comes down to satanic philosophy, and children are natural creatures. They're magicians. They're in tune with their instincts, and they will manipulate the world around them. So we would respect children, and the same as goes for animals. They are in tune with their nature. They do what comes to them instinctually. They will fight to the end to cling on to life. And that is something that we would admire in anybody, in a person, in a child, and an animal. So it's not just, you want to keep the cops away from you. It's like, no, okay, that's good too, but this comes down to our philosophy. It's tied to our principles. And do not complain about anything which you need not subject yourself. I mean, that makes sense. And when walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask them to stop. If he does not stop, destroy him. And this is another thing, it's like, if somebody bumps into you in the street, are you going to, shoot them? Or like, I think, no, Satanism is Satanism. It's bombastic. It's dramatic. It's got this kind of flavor text for effect. But you're not, if somebody's trying to kill you in the street, well, maybe you want to, act in self-defense and retaliate in equal force. But use your best judgment. And destroying a person doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It could be psychological. If you're a woman in the street and somebody, catcalling you and that's not warranted and you're not comfortable with that, well, by ignoring them or, some kind of psychological play, you can destroy their ego, in some way. So there's different ways of playing with that metaphor, with that idea that doesn't necessarily need to be, such extreme physical violence. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that covers all of them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I kind of, the thing that gets me is, cause I do a lot of video responses to Christian extremists, and when I have an opportunity to actually kind of get in and talk with them, they have this concept that there's a rule book, or there is some kind of there's something set that we can fall back on. And then I try to explain to them, I say, no, we don't have dogma in that sense. We don't have something that's like a rule book. There's so much independence in a lot of occult philosophy. And we have, like you mentioned, we have these kind of, whatever it might be, have these sort of loose guidelines that just says that, this is the way of approaching the situation, or not approaching the situation. This is the way of looking at life. Now, let me use an example like know thyself. Know thyself is very vague, but there's a lot of meaning to it. And so it's funny when you kind of try to describe that to someone who's sort of used to having their parameters well defined. They kind of have a hard time grasping this concept of don't take it literally, because they take their book so literally, and it's like, how can you believe it and take that literally? If you look at it symbolically and allegorically, it makes so much more sense, but they take it literally, and so they assume that we take like the writings of Aleister Crowley or the writings of Anton LaVey, like we take it verbatim literally. And it's like, no, we don't take it verbatim literally. We understand that when Anton LaVey says destroy someone, that he's not saying like you actually go over and physically dismantle them and destroy them. That's not what he meant. We understand that. And so it's just really funny to me. So when you were describing those, that's what was coming to my mind, was this, how some people really, they have a hard time not taking something literally. It's really funny.
Yeah, and I think it's because a lot of people want to belong. A lot of people want to, be a pagan, be a heathen, be a Satanist, be a Wiccan, be whatever, an Odinist or whatever. So they kind of want to have a rule book, a guideline to follow, so they can say, aha, well, I am this, and I follow these rules. And I think it could be necessary for some people. For others, it isn't. So I mean, for me, the way I don't memorize these statements. I don't memorize the sins and the rules. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but as I was talking about the rules of the earth, I was kind of reading. I had my cheat sheet up, because I live them. I live my life, and I naturally follow these. Not follow, but adhere to these rules and to these statements, just in the way I am. And I think if you come to Satanism and you read, do not harm small children, and you're thinking, oh, damn, you may not be a Satanist. So,
right.
So that's the kind of thing. If you feel like, oh, well, I need to, hide that impulse, so like, well, you probably have deeper issues, and you need to, seek some other kind of help. But I think a lot of people, but for some people, they do need something, especially young people. They're interested in Satanism. It's good to have these kind of things. And that's the idea, is that prior to LaVey, Satanism was not codified in any way. It was not established in any way. Satanism was whatever it is you wanted it to be. It was mainly a term it was a term of mockery or of Christianity, or it was a derogatory term against other religions. All religions thought Jews were Satanists. The Jews would think that Christians are satanic, or Muslims think the West is satanic. So it was just something that was thrown around. And yeah, you did have some blasphemous people, poets, artists, or ex-friars and clergymen that kind of went astray and embraced kind of satanic imagery. Mainly the source of all that was the church. The church would say, this is what Satanists do. They do these kinds of things. These are what witches do. And then they would, kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy and do those things that the church says Satanists do. So LaVey recognized that there wasn't anything from a satanic perspective, that from a self-proclaimed Satanist saying this is what Satanists do. Now, some people point to Crowley or something. Well, Crowley didn't consider himself a Satanist. He may have dropped the word Satanism, satanic here and there to kind of refer to just general blasphemy, but he himself did not consider himself a Satanist. His followers do not consider him a Satanist. So, and LaVey, also using him as a reference for some useful things and in referencing others as well, recognized there was like a current throughout mankind, throughout human history. There's just like a current, a satanic current that he recognized, picked up on, and codified and established as Satanism, and formed the Church of Satan in order to help protect that definition and to educate others on what it is, and also to be a conduit for other Satanists to work together and to collaborate on projects, to be a kind of a union of egoists in a way. We are still individuals. We're still free to do our own things. We have no obligation to work with other people, other members of the organization. But it's there for us to use as a resource.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find that interesting that, you had, so you had mentioned earlier, the Hellfire Club in England. Do you know any history of the Hellfire Club? Are you familiar with any of that?
Vaguely, a little bit. I mean, Sir Francis Dashwood, I believe, established a Hellfire Club in England, and a lot of prominent politicians, artists, poets congregated there, and kind of a carnal gathering. It is more of a center of pleasure and indulgence than anything else. It wasn't anything really a cult. It was just a celebration of fleshly living. And you've got, I think it was I don't want to misspeak of it. Benjamin Franklin may have attended the Hellfire clubs and was an influence on him, that kind of lifestyle. I mean, he was, a lively fellow. So, and that's kind of what we recognize from the Hellfire caves in which there were these gatherings, is that earthly carnal living. It's not about, supernatural occultism or anything like that. It's about, people that were in positions of power that got together and indulged in life. And then there's power in that and that kind of idea, and Church of Satan, following in that tradition.
Yeah, and sorry to put you on the spot there. The reason why I was just asking because I've heard of that before, and I wasn't too sure if they consciously, like, if they called themselves Satanists, or they may have referred to themselves jokingly as Satanists, but I don't think that was a club that was like. I mean, I've heard people talk about that as a Satanist organization. And I don't really consider them to have been a Satanist organization. I really feel kind of like what you had mentioned earlier, that Anton LaVey saw that opportunity really to create Satanism and fill that gap, because it hadn't been really openly, it hadn't been filled, and so he sort of filled that gap, which I feel was sort of necessary.
Yeah, and I do think that it was a model. It was absolutely a model for the Church of Satan. It was something that he drew inspiration from. And, but they did not themselves consider themselves Satanists or consider that activity as satanic. I mean, maybe, yeah, like you said, maybe in a poetic sense, and, implicitly it was satanic. And that's kind of what we call de facto Satanism. So these are people that acted in a way that today we would recognize as satanic, even though it wasn't defined back then. So I would definitely say it was de facto Satanism. It was a precursor, for sure, and it was a model for Satanism going into the 20th century. But it wasn't, itself, a definitive satanic organization.
And just to be clear, because it looks like maybe we have some new viewers here, but how would you describe the maybe the religious or viewpoints of Satanism? Do they actually worship Satan, or how would you describe that to people?
Oh, right. So no, we don't worship anything. We recognize ourselves as our own gods. We recognize that all gods and religions are man-made. So these are all fictions, they're all mythologies that reflect man's worries, hopes, fears, desires, and things of that nature. So we say when you worship a god, you are indirectly worshiping the people that created that god, because those gods are projections of those peoples. As Satanists, we reject that altogether. We reject that kind of spiritualism and supernaturalism. We recognize that this life that we have, this carnal, material life, is the one and only life, and that we recognize that throughout human history, there were certain things that were always denied of humans, the carnality, the sexuality, the selfishness, and all through almost every culture and religion, those things were deemed evil, and satanic. So we take that, idea, we take those principles and we say, we acknowledge them, we exercise them. We, do not shy away from tapping into those bestial instincts. We balance it with our rational, evolved intellectualism, but we do recognize ourselves as just evolved animals. Mm-hmm. But using our intellectualism, we're able to recognize the power of symbols of religion. So we take on the symbol of Satan because, well, it's the most popular representation of these ideas in the Western world. So there's use in that. There's power in that. And we also take it back. Before, Satan was something that was embodied on a mythological thing, Satan was a term for the adversary. In Hebrew, to be a Satan was to be an adversary, was to be somebody who accuses, that was kind of a pain in the butt to the status quo. It was a title given to people, kind of like an asshole or a jerk, that this person is a Satan, that person is a Satan. Or it was often used in political situations, like usurpers were considered Satans. And so that we're kind of hearkening back to that use of it. So that is our Satanism, is being the adversary, being the accuser, pointing out the flaws in the status quo and rejecting the status quo. And obviously, in Christian mythology, the image of Lucifer becoming the embodiment of that word, Satan, is useful to us. So we will use imagery that comes from that, but we do not acknowledge that kind of cosmology. We do not acknowledge that kind of theology. That's of no use to us. We may not always use explicitly satanic imagery either. We may use imagery from other pagan religions or mythologies, from Loki to any other demons or figures in religion or in culture in the past. Anything that we can use that embodies carnality, being the other, that's useful to us. So we pick and choose what's beneficial, what's stimulating, and we recognize that power that those symbols have. And that's what I say that's what separates Satanists from, say, atheists or secular humanists, because we do have that kind of that dogma, that kind of acceptance and respect for the idea of religion and the use of religion. We do see Satanism as a religion and as a philosophy. So those two things are important.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We have a question here that I'm going to get to in a second from somebody who's watching. But yeah, because there was a question that came up about in my own life about the 77, what Anton LaVey called the 77 devils. And I was looking through the list, and I saw all these characters from various mythology, like Loki, and then Coyote from the
Native American traditions.
Yeah, and so I saw these various characters who were tricksters, and I was kind of like looking at that, going, "That's not." I wouldn't really consider them satanic. Or I wouldn't consider them the traditional devil image that Christianity has. They were kind of the trickster, sort of darker aspect of kind of playing with you and telling you to not take yourself so seriously. And that's kind of how I look at the tricksters. They're the ones that kind of screw things up because you kind of need a little egg on your face at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a very, very satanic idea, and I'm glad you brought that up because, LaVey had just saying that if you take yourself too seriously, you don't leave others to take you seriously. Right. So yeah, we do, we do have a sense of humor, and we do try to have a little bit of, self-referential humor and kind of acknowledge our own limitations and have fun with it. Being a prankster, being a comedian, and those are all, satanic archetypes. And yeah, that's why, things like Loki and Coyote were were referenced in LaVey's material. Because, he himself was a prankster. He himself was a jokester. He was known to put whoopee cushions on the seats, when guests arrived. He was known to be a collector of novelty toys and gag items. And his Bible was like the Johnson Smith catalog, this catalog of oddities and kind of prank materials. And to him, that was satanic. Not a dusty old occult grimoire. That wasn't very interesting to him at all. So I mean, it's a subjective thing, but it's recognizing the love of life, the love of just having fun, and those things that are part of the human condition, of the human experience. It's not, we're not all sullen, serious, darkened people. Like we like to have fun. We like to enjoy this existence, with ourselves, with others, with our loved ones, with our pets. And it's all, we try to experience the whole spectrum of life.
Definitely. So we got a question here from from at Systemancon. I am so sorry, I can't pronounce that.
Okay.
At Systemacon. I think it's well, let me just get to the question. So the question is, does the Church of Satan recognize the indigenous peoples as some of this continent's original pagans?
I mean, I could see that. I mean, the Church of Satan doesn't take any top-down political stances. Because that can be a political idea, but we do recognize that, yeah, there were religions long before Christianity, and those were products of those peoples and of those cultures. And I think for people of those cultures, it might be beneficial for them to tap into that. If Satan doesn't, if you're not from the Western world, the image of Satan might not do anything for you. It's like, okay, that's, a white man's thing. So you may want to recognize, coyote. You might want to recognize whatever mythologies resonate with you. So that we are open to that. Absolutely. But that again is subjective to those people. We're not trying to say that should be what everybody does or everybody should acknowledge and follow that. It's subjective to those people and what works for them. I know Native American Satanists that do use that kind of symbolism in their ritual and in their kind of in their altars and their ritual chambers, and because that stimulates them, that affects them, that is within their psyche, and that's absolutely useful.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think it's Hasatan is in the Old Testament is the adversary. I think it's Hasatan. But yeah, because it is very much it is part of that Western Abrahamic religious belief, and it's really interesting. Right. I find that it seems like a lot of fundamentalists, because I always want to make a distinction between the average Christian out there and the average Catholic to the people who are like extremists, because I think there's a clear distinction there. But some of these people who are extremists, they almost by believing that Satanists perform and do some of these things, that they actually worship Satan and that they actually corrupt the innocent or harm animals or harm children, harming the innocent. It's almost like what they're doing is, by vilifying and accepting that is real, what it does is it reinforces their own belief of their image, their concept of God. It's almost like if they can see their own shadow, then they can accept what they project as real. You know what I mean? In an analogous way of this.
Yeah, it reinforces their beliefs. It scares people into following their beliefs, and in many ways, it creates a monster. They create these terrible things that are done, quote unquote, in the name of Satan, are not the products of Satanism, but they're the products of Christianity, of fundamental Christianity, fundamentalism. They're the products of these people that are trying to promote Satanism as this anti-life philosophy, which it's not. And they've created these monsters themselves, and they need a monster to keep their people in line.
Yeah, definitely. And so that kind of leads into one of the things we were going to discuss, the bunko sheet, because I got that off the website. But there was a lot of various different things that people believe that Satanists Satanists do believe, and it sounds like you kind of touched on that a little. You've already touched on a lot of them actually.
Yeah, and actually, it's been a while since I looked at the Bunko sheet, but the general idea is that there are both people who are detractors of Satanism, whether they're Christians or Muslims, or they're just disgruntled occultists and pagans and stuff like that have a bone to pick with Satanism, and they try to maybe misrepresent the philosophy of Satanism or the organization of the Church of Satan. And the Satanic Bunko sheet is a kind of guideline of how to recognize that, how to recognize the kind of misinformation that's out there and the kind of techniques that people use to try to twist Satanism into being something that it's not, and or trying to twist the Church of Satan to be something that it's not, whether it's out of malcontent or it's out of wishful thinking. I mean, because that could go either way. I mean, some people want the Church of Satan to be something that it's not, to be more than what it was meant to be, due to their own needs and to their own need to be more social or more accepted by the masses. So that's what it's for. It's to be clear as to what we are and what Satanism is and what it isn't, and the reasons why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we touched a little bit on magic, and you had described it, how there are. It sounds like a lot of different beliefs. I always want to find a better term for it, but the best I can say is like pagan occult belief. Is that people are very independent in their thought and their approach. Some believe in polytheistic concepts. Some people are pantheistic, animistic, even monotheistic. Some are agnostic. Some are atheistic. So there is such a wide gamut of beliefs out there. And when it comes to the concept of magic, ceremonial magic, ritual, how does the Church of Satan, or better yet, you yourself and possibly other Satanists, how do they view and approach magic and ritual?
So we use the idea of magic in two ways. Well, there's lesser magic, which is the manipulation of social situations. Could be seen as social engineering in a way. It's the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you present yourself, and things like that. If you're really interested in lesser magic, I highly recommend The Satanic Witch, which was Anton LaVey's book, mainly geared to females that would use their femininity as a weapon, as a tool to manipulate the world around them. And that's definitely an application of lesser magic. It's a whole book. I actually would say it's probably LaVey's most original and most comprehensive, one of his most comprehensive books on the application of Satanism, more so than even the Satanic Bible, I think. And it's also not just for women; it's just as good for men too, to both understand the wile and guile of women around them, but also to apply some of these things themselves and to kind of learn and to use these tools of lesser magic in their life. And then we use the idea of greater magic. And greater magic is formal ritual ceremony. And I think that can even be taken in two different ways. There's a psychological practice. It's something that is done to get rid of any kind of emotional or psychological baggage. And when you put a curse on somebody, it could be somebody that's holding you back in life, that's kind of just clouding your judgment and just haunting, your everyday life. You're having trouble sleeping, things like that. You may want to put a curse on them in a ritual setting where you symbolically destroy that person, and that person is in your mind, no longer in your way. And that can be very therapeutic, and you can go about your life and you can let go of that kind of baggage and go about your life in a productive, healthy manner. And then, well, if that person happens to come to a a bad end, maybe it had something to do with it, maybe not. It could be coincidence, could not. But if you did use magic, recognize it. Recognize that it worked for you, that you utilized it, because in the future, whether it's pure psychology or something more, it may not work for you. You know, it's kind of the idea of the placebo. You know, you take a placebo because you believe that it works, but if you start believing that it doesn't work anymore, you start to question it and start to, well, I don't want to say that, but like it just stops working for you. Whether it's purely psychological or it's something more, I mean that's the guideline that we use. I hesitate with saying being skeptical, because you should be skeptical. You should always question things, you know, be rational about it. But in the terms of magic, you know, you do want it to be useful for you. So you have to go into these ritual situations, believing in a way. We call the ritual chamber the intellectual decompression chamber. We say, okay, in the ritual chamber, you leave your intellectualism behind. In the ritual chamber, the things that you say and you do, you almost take literally. And people get hung up about that because they'll take references from the Satanic Bible or the Satanic rituals or some of LaVey's other works, and they'll say, oh, well, LaVey is saying, hail Satan here, and he's calling upon this demon there, so he must actually believe in these things. It's like, well, you're taking out the context of the ritual. In the ritual, you say these things as if they're true, so that you can drive that kind of emotional, adrenal kind of rush, so that you can, you know, exercise that mental release. And whether it's, you know, just subjective or it's more than that, you know, we have these tools for you to use, to get to the bedrock of this kind of unknown science. And whatever it is, we do acknowledge it as part of the natural world. We do not see this as being supernatural. LaVey actually called it supernormal. He called this kind of a unknown part of the normal world around us. It's not a spirituality. It's not supernatural outside of the natural world. It's just a part of the natural world that we may not fully understand just yet. And as Satanists, we explore that, and, you know, with an open mind, but also with a rational mind. And if it is not interesting to you, if it doesn't work for you, it's not your cup of tea, then you're free to go about your life, you know, focusing elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because in a cult and witch ritual, you have to be focused, and you have these little toys and everything around you that sort of help you concentrate on what you're doing rather than why you're doing it. You know, it's kind of like, for an example, an athlete. An athlete prepares themselves mentally before a race. And if they are thinking about the person next to them, or they're thinking about their mortgage, or thinking about this, or they're thinking about anything, it is distracting from their goal. And that is that you need that sort of single focus during that race. And if you allow yourself to be distracted by something other than winning that race, you're probably not going to win it. And you can do that off the field. Definitely, you can start thinking about whatever it is. But when you're in that ritual chamber, your single focus is on that goal. And I think that is one of the benefits of having toys. You know, people talk about the witch's tools, and do you really need them? And it's kind of like, yes, you do need them, because what they do is they help you to kind of concentrate on something. It's like meditation. You don't actually just sit there, close your eyes, and you don't think about anything. You're thinking about something. But you understand, you kind of like let that come in and let it go out. And it's the same thing with magic. You're going through, you're doing what you're doing in your ritual, and things are maybe coming into your mind, and you're just kind of like letting them go out, because you have to remain single. You have to have a single focus and a single goal. And that's what you're doing at that time. And so I could definitely relate to what you had said about there, because when you do when you say Hail Satan, or you are interacting,
the conjuring demons. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to say that. I mean, it's more like in the Goetia, it's more like spirits or
Hmm.
something like that. But if you are doing that, you're not thinking about like what it actually is. I think the Goetia is actually a bad example of that. But what you're actually doing is you are actually it's a part of the ritual. It's a part of that psychological drama, the psychodrama, like we had talked about before. And
Yes.
it's it's the trappings of the ritual that is necessary to get yourself into that mood, if you will, of what you are doing. I mean, you can't like curse somebody or do any kind of a spell if your emotion is different from that. You know what I mean? It's hard to
Yep.
curse somebody while you're sitting there, concentrating on My Little Pony. you know, for an
I don't
example.
know. There are plenty of bronies out there. I don't know.
Well, that might be,
Yeah,
be different.
And you touch on something that's important too, is the idea that, if you're going to curse somebody, you don't want to have any regret in that. And that's important because, for one, well, if you do have regret, it's not going to work as a psychological tool. And if something did happen to that person, well, that's going to be even worse because you're going to have that regret, and that's going to be a burden on you going forward. So these kinds of things are important. If you're going to curse somebody, you should mean it, and you should be happily anticipating whatever results from it. In the same way goes for a lust ritual. Sometimes a lust ritual can become a curse ritual on yourself. You conduct a lust ritual on somebody and you get more than you bargained for, and now this it becomes self-destructive. So you have to be careful and be rational about it. Even if it's just purely psychological. You have to kind of weigh all these things before you get to the ritual chamber. But once you're in the ritual chamber, you're committed.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. So, I typed in the chat a little while ago. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in there. There was one comment from the poster earlier. He said it sounds like he or she was just agreeing with your statement. They said exactly, Church of Satan deserves to be distinctive from satanic cults.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even call them satanic cults. I would just call them cults or devil worshipping cults, or I even use a term that LaVey liked to use. He called them Christians. People who literally believe in the Christian theology and just side with the devil. He's like, well, they're just renegade Christians. They're just rebellious Christians. And that you kind of get under the skin of some people who like to, claim themselves as such. But the idea is to be distinctive, is to recognize that, Satanism is a thing. It is a philosophy. It is a religion. It's represented by an organization. Because if we lose that, if we start to just say, well, Satanism can be whatever you want it to be, Satanism could be anything that anybody wants it to be, just, live your life, whatever, and kind of be nihilistic about it. Satanism then loses its meaning, and then it could easily return to just being a derogatory term, just being something that's thrown around without any significance or meaning to it. That's why we do in a way fight for its definition and its establishment as a carnal, atheistic philosophy, because that is what it was from its foundation. That's how it was developed by Anton LaVey, and that's how it was. It is being represented by the Church of Satan. And I actually did notice in the chat that user said that they were part of a indigenous nation, and as a child, some of the people, the people around them called their sacred ceremonies devil worship. And yeah, that's unfortunate. Anything that kind of goes back to this idea that anything that was not Christianity or what was not part of the dominant culture or religion in whatever region in the world that was in was called devil worship or Satanism. Right. And so, before LaVey established the Church of Satan and Satanism. And that's what it was. Anything was Satanism. Everything was Satanism. All pagan religions were Satanism. So it was just this throwaway term. Unfortunately, it still has that effect in certain communities, in certain parts of the world, and it's just it's just scapegoating. You know, that's what people do. They will define the other and they will attack the other. As Satanists, we accept being the other, but we define ourselves. We reject the definition of others on us, and instead we define it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which it looks like you have access to the chat there. But there's another question that came up. Loopy Louise. I like that name, Loopy Louise. It's my understanding that Satanists are highly individualistic people. What do you think drives such individualistic people together to the community of the church?
Well, I would hesitate using the term community of the church, because the Church of Satan isn't really a community. It's more of like a meta tribe. And I think as an individualist, I put my interests first and foremost. That does not mean I put my interests are exclusive. You know, once I have satisfied my needs, once I have satisfied the things that I need to take care of in my life and my ego, I can then better work with others to either benefit me or to benefit them because I care about them. And by helping somebody that I care about, it brings me a kind of a positive emotional response. And so I have that kind of incentive. You know, we are social creatures. Humans are social creatures. We do not reject that. We are not living on islands. Satanists are not, you know, people living on islands and they don't talk to anybody else. And that's the sin of solipsism. That is one of the biggest satanic sins, is actually solipsism, to think that you are the only person in the world that matters and not having perspective from the outside. You know, we are our own gods, but we acknowledge that there are other gods out there, and we may want to work and collaborate with other members of the Church of Satan, or maybe independent Satanists that acknowledge LaVey's philosophy, because, you know, it may help us and it may widen our spheres of influence, and there's kind of a mutual beneficial effect there. I mean, that's the reason why I joined the Church of Satan. I joined the Church of Satan because I saw a mutually beneficial situation out of it. And I was involved in music, in promotion, in events in New York City, and I saw the Church of Satan being very active in that field. I saw Church of Satan members who were artists and musicians that were performing live, and I was networking with them. They were performing at the shows that I was working with, and I wanted to continue that relationship on a more formal level. I wanted to acknowledge that the Church of Satan was actually benefiting me, and I wanted to return that and also continue that. So that's why I joined the Church of Satan. It's not something I did lightly. It's not something I just, woke up one day and decided to do. It's like I saw there was a reason for it. I saw that there was something I can get out of it. I'm not somebody that just easily joins things, and that's the idea that LaVey liked to kind of throw out, is like the Church of Satan is an organization for non-joiners. And we do see the Church of Satan as a cabal, as a kind of conduit. It's a place where people, it's an idea more than a place. It's not an actual physical church. There are no churches. There are no physical places to congregate, because we do not congregate. And we may get together with other Satanists, but we do try to maintain our independence and sovereignty, but make use of social situations when they arise. And, you know, if you're interested, if you could go to the Church of Satan website at churchofsatan.com, and there's a news menu item, and underneath that you see news and events, and you'll see events that Church of Satan members are doing, whether they're musicians and they're doing live shows, or they're writers and they're doing a book signing, or artists and they're doing a gallery. Check out the calendar, see what's going on. We've got a big event in December 2nd in Florida. where we're having the book party, the book release and celebration of The Devil's Reign 2, which is a book of art curated by Magus Peter Gilmore. And that's good. To accompany that, there's going to be a live show with the Electric Hellfire Club and several other performers on the Nathan Gray Collective. So that's going to be a pretty big satanic gathering. And if you are interested to see what Satanists are doing, and maybe want to head out to Florida and see what that's like. And you can see how they socialize too. You know, it's a mutually beneficial society. You recognize the work that others are doing. You can help collaborate with them or just, you know, acknowledge from a distance, and that's fine too. Just maintain your self-interest, maintain your sovereignty. Do not ever feel like you have to, congregate with others. You have to support people that you may not be agreeing on things, but at the same time respect, their rights to do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I encourage people who are interested in, possibly, finding out more about Satanism, even if they're just curious, maybe not just, interested in joining, but maybe just kind of like want to see what it's about and what they do. I think that your website is very extensive. There's actually a lot of, you go into one link and then it leads into other links and then there's other things there. So definitely there's a lot of information there for people and a lot of links to other things like you had mentioned before. Maybe we can mention later on the Black Flame and the Heathen Harvest and some of the other podcasts that you had mentioned before. But there's another question that came up. This is from Nobody Here. Question is, could it not be argued that cursing from a psychological standpoint isn't ideal for a healthy long-term mental health, given that letting go is often part of emotional healing?
Well, actually, that's a good question because part of cursing is letting go. And that's the idea, is that you get into the ritual chamber and you do what's called a destruction ritual, and you just let it all out. Let it all out, and then that's why I was saying, like, you almost have to kind of buy into it and say, okay, once the ritual is done, it's like, so it is done. That is it. This person is now no longer a part of my life. So you let go of that. You come out of the ritual chamber. You should let go of that situation. Go about your life. Everyone has different ways of handling that. The way that manifests in detail could vary based on their own subjective experiences. But part of the curse is to let go, is to move on with your life. If you find yourself having to curse a person over and over and over again, well, you may need to do something else. That may not be working for you. So, no, that's a good question, but that's something we do recognize.
And I think it can turn into a symbiotic relationship. I often find myself, if I am encountering or hearing from somebody who's always complaining about a specific situation or a specific person, and obviously we can sit there and we can say, oh, so-and-so was such a fucking asshole, or at work today the situation was so sucky, but if they keep bringing it up, you realize that now they've developed a relationship. It's almost symbiotic. It's like, if you don't like the situation or the purpose, change it. Stop complaining about it. And it's like they almost get defensive about it. But it's like, if you keep bringing it up, do something about it. Don't just sit there and keep complaining, because then you're creating that situation and you're getting something out of it. You're living off of that. And that's not good. You want to definitely either quit that job or destroy that relationship. One of the two.
Yeah, or recognize that the masochism is a real thing. Right. Some people are masochistic, and recognize that, and if that situation is not fulfilling in that manner, maybe seek a different situation that's better, that's more fulfilling in that. But as Satanists, like I said, we're not a good guy philosophy. We recognize that some people, need that kind of symbiotic relationship. And, but as long as they're honest with themselves, that's the best thing to do, because if you're honest with yourself, you recognize the situation you're in, you can best utilize that situation to fill your needs. If you're self-deceiving, if you're self-deceitful, it's going to be counterproductive. You're not going to get the most out of the situation, and it could lead to a very unhealthy relationship. It's very tricky, because I think some people, like I said, need that kind of relationship. I think that, because in my experience, I think there are some people that want to believe in the destruction ritual and cursing and things like that because they lack the power to do something about it. Right. And they may be missing something. They're lacking the perspective to recognize that there might be something that you can do about it, but they lack the courage to do it. They lack the will to do that. So maybe a destruction ritual isn't necessary. Maybe a compassion ritual for yourself is necessary to give you the strength, to give you that encouragement, that confidence to do something about the situation. So, that's another way of looking at it. It's like, maybe destruction isn't the way. Maybe compassion for yourself is the way. So, different ways to settle that situation.
Yes, definitely. And the other thing too is I will hear, there's a joke that the first 3 spells or magic rituals that people do is 1, a curse, love spell, and the money spell. Those are the big 3 ones, Yeah. And it's kind of like there's just like if you're a carpenter or you're a physician or any profession, you have a whole myriad of tools before you. And if you are just cursing people all the time, cursing people, you're going to be draining your energy, and you're not actually going to be fixing the situation. Some situations you may not call for a curse. It may call for something else. It may not call for a binding, or it may not call for getting someone to fall in love with you or get money. There may be other things that you need to look at in your life or in that situation to change that situation, or to manipulate that situation for your benefit, and maybe for the benefit of someone else. And if we kind of get wrapped up in this cursing people who cut you off in traffic over and over again, it's like you're going to be driving yourself nuts. You're going to be wasting your energy, and you're going to find that every little thing is pissing you off, because you are, instead of focusing on changing the situation, you're actually focusing on your lack of ability, your lack of changing that situation. Does that make sense?
No, it does, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, and that tool becomes less useful. Use it in the wrong way. Yeah, definitely. All right, so let me see. Let's see what else. Have you heard back anything on Twitter? Yeah. Mm-hmm. On Twitter, no, but I've heard back on some questions that I asked. We talked about earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Do you want to talk about that?
Okay, sure. I mean, in conversation, we talked. You mentioned that if there was a possibility of some kind of satanic museum or something like that. What I can say is that we do have access to the archives of Anton LaVey. One of the big projects that the Church of Satan is involved in right now is going through that massive archive and presenting that on our website, on our YouTube channel. We recently published an interview with Anton LaVey that was kind of long lost. It was from the 70s. It was a documentarian covering the occult in San Francisco, and he talked to Anton LaVey and asked him certain questions that actually are asked of Satanism in the Church of Satan a lot today. He asked them, do you believe in God? And LaVey explicitly said, no, I don't. He asked them, what does Satan mean to you? If you don't believe in Satan, what does Satan mean to you? And he answers that in very clear terms. Satan is a representation of indulgence and rebellion and individualism. And he puts it in his own way. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. One of our major goals is to go through this archive to make it available to academics who are interested in the history of Satanism, and also to write to cover it, to publish it in our own channels, and to document it. We'll see where that goes in the future, but that's definitely a big part of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And he Magus Peter Gilmore also has a not necessarily another book coming out, but he has a reprint of a book that went out recently, or not recently, but in the past. And it sounds like he's doing another reprint of that.
Yeah, he is. So, and I believe it was, and I can look this up really quick here, but I believe it was in 2012.
What did we do before Google?
I know, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah, so what happened is that actually it was in 2007. Wow, even further back. Magus Gilmore published the Satanic Scriptures, which was a collection of essays and articles that were published in the Black Flame, the Cloven Hoof, and on our websites. And there were also some never before seen articles that were compiled into the Satanic Scriptures. And it was put out by Scapegoat Publishing, and it sold out. It went through, I think, a few printings, and it became a very popular book over the years. Unfortunately, due to an issue with the printer, not the publisher or the author, but with the printer, that it's been out of print for about a year or a little over a year. So I think those issues are actually being resolved right now. So we're going to do another printing soon. We're looking at early 2017, so early next year. We hope to get that back in on Amazon and on store shelves. It's become a very hot item, on eBay and used book places, and it's going for several $100s actually. Wow. So, if you're interested in that kind of rare printing of it, go ahead and indulge. But we do have plans on bringing it back. I do want to also note, though, it is available on Kindle, and since that's outside the printer, it's easily purchasable and readable on either your Kindle device or the free Kindle Cloud Reader that you can use on your desktop computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of convenient for that, because you don't like you said, you don't have to go through a publisher with that. I mean, I'm not exactly familiar with it, but it sounds like maybe you can almost do that independently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, but it's still going. It's still going through the publisher. We still have a publisher involved in this, but it's just it was an issue with the printing that was keeping the actual physical book out there and from being out there, and that's not the issue with the Kindle. So that is out there. No. And I recommend it. I do actually. I own, I think, 3 copies of the book. I have a special limited edition that Magus Gilmore signed for me. I also have the Spanish language edition. Actually, that's still available. You could search for that, just the Satanic Scriptures Spanish, and there's a Spanish language translation of that. And I also have a paperback edition that I keep for referencing bookmarks, earmarks, and things like that. And I also have the Kindle version because it's easy to just search and put in a keyword and search around for it and make notes and things like that. So, all these are, as somebody who talks about Satanism a lot in media, I like to make sure I'm accurate and that I'm referencing things that are appropriate and in the right context. So I think that a lot of people miss that, and they miss context, and I think it's important to read the full essay, the full book, to get that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're not just like bullshitting and making it all up on the fly. You actually have reference. Yeah. That is one good thing about the like, I have PDFs of almost so many books that I reference all the time, and it's fantastic. You can just put in a search, like you can put in a term or a little phrase, like if I'm trying to find somebody where somebody got a certain quote, I'll just put in that quote into a search, and it comes up. Whereas before, I would have to go through a book and go, oh, okay, so it's related to that. Maybe it's in this chapter. You kind of have to like flip through the book, and it would take me like, I don't know, maybe a half an hour to find something sometimes. Whereas now with the PDF, I just type it in. It takes like 5 minutes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
It's funny. I don't know, what age you were at when the internet became like a really big thing. But when I was younger and I was getting into the occult and witchcraft, luckily I grew up in the Bay Area, Berkeley specifically, so there were a lot of bookstores that just got closed down today, that aren't around today. But you would have to go to bookstores and look through books and go to used bookstores, and sometimes you couldn't even find that book, and it was really difficult to get books on, especially the occult. And and nowadays you just do a simple search on Google and boom, it pops up. It's like it's amazing, what kind of access we have to information today. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and especially like San Francisco, there's so many bookstores that are just there's some bookstores in San Francisco. There's City Lights, which is still there at Broadway and Columbus. But a lot of bookstores, there was a great metaphysical bookstore that was right up the street from me here, and they Fields Bookstore, and they were here forever, and they nothing but occult, nothing but metaphysical books. And they just went out of business, because first of all, rent's so expensive here. But the other thing is that it just wasn't the volume of businesses they used to have before. So.
Yeah, it's hard to compete with Amazon. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just went on a little tangent there.
No worries. No, that's I don't want to keep repeating that because I did talk about that on our last interview last weekend. But occult bookstores were a very big part of my me finding Satanism. Especially underground counterculture bookstores. That's where I encountered the Black Flame, which was the Church of Satan's magazine, which kind of come full circle. I'm now involved in helping to edit and publish articles for the online version of the Black Flame for the Church of Satan.
And let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you do. Let's kind of put the Church of Satan off to the side there. Let's talk about what do you do? Because I know that you have some podcasts, and it sounds like you are very interested in the music scene. So tell us a little bit about what you do, what your personal life is about, if you don't mind.
For sure. But so I spend a lot of time working with podcasts. I do have my own podcast on Radio Free Satan. And that's Chaos Sedated, which is a dark ambient noise experimental music podcast. It's more of like a mixtape format. I get new releases and also classics, and I blend them together into an hour-long episode with some breaks in between for promos and such. But the general idea is that I'm pulling from my experience as a DJ. I used to be a DJ in the New York area and doing experimental shows and underground counterculture events and that needed backdrops and things like that, or opening for bands. So I'm just pulling from my experience doing that and from my library of music and, picking out nuggets that were either, long forgotten or, classics and also new stuff. So that's Chaos Sedated. And then I have another podcast, which I do at Heathen Harvest called The Forest Passage. And that's more of a discussion podcast, also involved with music. Heathen Harvest is one of the longest running underground counterculture websites out there. It's focuses on what's called post-industrial music. So music that's been influenced by artists like Throbbing Gristle and Coil and things like that. It covers like neo-folk, dark ambient, industrial, and some black metal too, doom metal, drone metal, things like the more experimental, avant-garde side of metal. So we include that as well. And on the Forest Passage, I talk about the more electronic, eccentric electronic side of things, where my co-host, comes from more of a black metal background, so he talks about the latest releases and topics in black metal. So we kind of both join our thoughts and talk about also current affairs and current themes going on in the underground music world. So we try to do that at least once or twice a month. We also have guests on. We have artists, musicians. I recently did an interview with Danny Hyde, are you familiar with the band Coil?
Not really. I know you had mentioned before Ghost. I'm familiar with Ghost, but that's Coil, no. Well,
that's a side thing, but Coil actually, they're kind of significant in the kind of chaos magic world. They were involved with Psychic TV, which was part of the Temple of Psychic Youth. So they were kind of influential in that scene, but there are two members of Coil, Peter and John Balance. But there was also a third member. There was this producer and audio engineer who was always in the background in some of their biggest releases, and this guy, Danny Hyde. And I've interviewed him and talked about his experience with Coil and also, with being around such powerful, influential people. So that's the kind of thing that we do on the Forest Passage. And on Heathen Harvest, I do interviews with musicians. I do articles. I'm working on a couple articles right now. I do reviews and I do some editorial work as well, which I'm working on. Actually, I'm working on an article talking about the intersection between Satanism and heathenism. Since, Heathen Harvest, and also are being involved with neo-folk music and, that kind of traditional folk music. We get a lot of people coming to, our website interested in Asatru and Odinism and things like that, neo-paganism. And, there's often, Satanism is brought up in some way or another. And there is an intersection, but there are also very clear differences. So I'm working on an article covering that. But that's Heathen Harvest. And I also work, on The Black Flame, which is the Church of Satan's, online magazine. And that's more culture, lifestyle, it's not so much about philosophy and it's more about the application of Satanism in the arts and in life. So you got articles there about, brewing, beer brewing. You have interviews with musicians. You've got, an article by Nathan Gray about, music concerts as ritual and things like that. I recently did an interview with the band Ghost for the Black Flame, not Ghost BC, not the big metal band, the popular metal band. This is Ghost GOST, which is actually a synthwave electronic musician. Yeah. No, he kind of plays on that. I mean, there's several dozen artists out there called Ghost, so they happen to share that. I think he changed his name. He dropped the H in order to distinguish himself. But yeah, he's into electronic music, influenced by 80s music like Tangerine Dream, but also influenced by contemporary electronic music like Justice and EDM. But he takes all of that and he applies kind of he applies a satanic aesthetic to it. And in his new album that was actually just released yesterday, Non Servitum, I think it's called. It's actually explicitly, like, from beginning to end, themed around the fall of Lucifer and the corruption of man. And so it's kind of retelling of the Paradise Lost story, but on an electronic synthwave album. So if you've seen the show, say Stranger Things, and if you remember the that intro song to the show, that kind of synthy John Carpenter soundtrack. That's kind of the idea. That's the aesthetic applied to Satanism. So I think some people will be interested in that.
Okay. Well, that sounds interesting.
I can talk more and more about what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm hogging the time.
No. I mean, I think no. Don't worry about it, because I know that, like, the timeline of us getting together and doing this interview. The very first time we wanted to talk about the Church of Satan, kind of like put to rest a lot of the misconceptions. And then I wanted to bring you back and then talk about kind of like you and how you incorporate Satanism and what you do, because you're a very busy man. You have a lot of stuff going on. And it was really interesting to hear about this underground music scene, the Black Flame and the Heathen Harvest, and how you had kind of taken the reins, if you will, of the social media at the Church of Satan and kind of like improved upon it and brought it up to speed, sort of say. And then I had a problem with the very first interview, and so I brought you back so we could kind of redo the interview. And so I felt like we neglected your aspect. So I don't mind spending a little bit of time talking about you at all. But I also want to be aware of the time too, because we started at 11 and it's like 1:15 now. So I don't want to encroach on your time, because I'm enjoying this conversation.
I got plenty of time.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I took the reins of anything at the Church of Satan and their social media. I think what that was a reference to was taking the reins at Radio Free Satan.
Okay.
Yeah, Radio Free Satan was around for a long while. 15. We just did our 15-year anniversary last year, so 16 years.
Oh wow!
Is it 15 years? Oh man, I'm terrible. I mean, I think it was 10 years. Actually, 10 years. I think some of the hosts are gonna be very upset with me on that. But
your Twitter feeds is gonna fire up.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been doing this for a long while now. But when I came to Radio Free Satan, I noticed that some of the technology and social media wasn't up to snuff. So I actually collaborated with some other members of the network, and we rebuilt the website. We brought it up to speed. We got the shows on iTunes. We got them on SoundCloud, and we got them on several different services. And you can subscribe to them. The website updates automatically every week with new episodes. We've got about a dozen different shows. We also have a bigger presence on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. And we actually have a presence on YouTube as well. We have one DJ Lyra Shea, and she does industrial goth music, and she actually records herself live doing the mixes. So she has a camera set up with her DJ gear, and you could actually watch her, do these live mixes, and she records them and posts them on YouTube. So that's over there on our YouTube channel. You could search for that at, Radio Free Satan on YouTube. So we do a lot of that, and we've got so much more going on. We've got, I think Halloween, we've got something special, going on there. We're going to bring some classic satanic music and then put some focus on that. We also want to do some more stuff on YouTube, things like this, like streaming interviews, doing, more with satanic music by members of the Church of Satan, because that's actually a very, very strong arm of the Church of Satan is our artists, our musicians. They're out there applying satanic aesthetic to music, to literature, to poetry, and we want to bring more attention to that and help promote that, because, like I said, the Church of Satan is a mutually beneficial network. It's a way of promoting others who have the same interests and philosophies as ourselves. So that's what Radio Free Satan is doing with its hosts, with its shows, and with other members of the organization. The Church of Satan itself is run by many people, and I'm very happy to be a part of it, to help promote the work of other individuals. I'm working with several book publishers and things like that. We're always working with each other, collaborating, and also just sharing resources and ideas. myself, if we're just going to talk about what I'm working on right now, is I'm in the middle of recording a album of my own music under the name Anarch. I've got a few releases on some compilations, online compilations. This is experimental collage music, but I am working on more structure, a little bit influenced by synthwave music, influenced by ambient music, soundtracks, and things like that, but also applying it to, my philosophy, my outlook, some of my own concepts. So it's something that I'm working on right now. Probably hear about that in the coming months. So if people want to look that up, if they want to look up Anarch on SoundCloud, maybe I'll include a link. I'll shoot you a link that you can post
Definitely,
up there.
yes, please
People can check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. I was just saying that. Yeah, so send me the links and I'll put it below. People can click onto that and go there.
Yeah, and another big thing that I'm working on right now is an article on tiki culture. My wife and I are really into tiki culture. We go to tiki bars and conventions, and actually,
they have tiki conventions.
Yeah, there's Tiki Oasis in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they also have some tiki. I think it's called Tiki Con in Portland, and we haven't been to that, but we've been to Ohana on the Lake, which is in upstate New York in Lake George. That's a smaller one, but it's a very popular. It's been going on for a long time. There's also Tiki Caliente in Palm Springs. There's also one in Nevada, in Las Vegas, I think that one's more like rockabilly, retro 50s culture in general, but tiki is part of that. Yeah, so that's a big part of what we do too. I got a big poster back there from Tiki Oasis. And so actually working on a blogger has contacted me and our high priestess, Peggy Nadramina, to talk about tiki culture and how it plays into Satanism. How does Satanism apply to tiki culture and things like that? And it definitely does. When I was at Tiki Oasis last month, and I was there with almost a dozen or so Church of Satan members. Several of them were actually performing on the stage. You had Jimmy Psycho Experiment playing at Black Magic Beach Party playing. So these are on the big stage. You had Church of Satan members wearing the Baphomets performing in front of this huge tiki convention. And I was with my wife, and we were with actually Blanche Barton, Anton LaVey's last partner. She was there with her family, and Xerxes was there too. It was a good time. It was just everybody enjoying the kind of atmosphere. This is a total environment, what LaVey called he called it a total environment, which is a place where an aesthetic is in complete control. Well, you have an aesthetic that's in complete control of that environment. It's in terms of visually, musically, and in every way, it captures a moment of time. And that's what tiki culture, I think, tries to do. It tries to capture kind of this pop Polynesian moment in time in the 50s, post-war, and through the Mai Tai, through the drinks, through the moais, through all of that. I think that is an application of a total environment. So, and also there's also the voluptuous women and the strong, confident men. All of that stuff is an important part of Satanism, is the balance between men and women using their strengths and their unique characteristics to their advantage. I think that's a big part of kind of retro 50s aesthetic and tiki culture in general.
It's interesting because I think of it as kind of kitsch, tiki culture. It kind of it conjures up that image for me. So just to switch gears here for a second, we got a couple more questions that popped up. One is I do nothing of Satanism, but from what I have heard here so far, it sounds like a lot of people who aren't part of traditional world religions aren't are effectively Satanists. Any thoughts? Let me read that again. I do nothing of Satanism, but from what I have heard so far, it sounds like a lot of people who aren't part of traditional world religions are effectively Satanists. Any thoughts?
Well, the way I kind of interpret that question, the way I read it is that I think that you could be primed to be a Satanist. I think that Satanism may be more applicable to you if you are like an outsider from all your traditional cultures and things like that. I think Satanism is a religion, a philosophy for outsiders. So I think you would be more not susceptible. You are more open to Satanism in that sense. I don't think you would necessarily be satanic just for being an outsider, because there's other things to Satanism. There's an appreciation for a darker aesthetic. There's an appreciation for the carnal, bestial side of man, recognizing the kind of instinctual side within all of us and exercising it. There's a whole bunch of other things that are part of the satanic philosophy, the satanic culture and aesthetic, that would make somebody a Satanist, not just, being an outsider, but that can lead to Satanism, or make somebody more, if not a Satanist themselves, at least more appreciative of Satanism. And as we work with a lot of people who are not explicitly Satanists themselves, but they may have some kind of mutual interest with Satanists. I mean, not everybody that I'm around in life is a Satanist. Actually very few people are, in my opinion, very few people in this world are really Satanists. So I cannot reasonably be expected to just hang around Satanists all the time. I hang around with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and religions. I'm not always open about everything. I mean, I don't hide anything per se, but I don't explicitly, tell them things that unless I'm asked about it. But I think for the most part, I think people accept me, for who I am, and they have no problems, with my ideas. And, if, I tell them about it, and some of them might have problems with my ideas, but I don't see any reason to, tell them about it and to complicate that relationship. So, you have to kind of balance that kind of situation, especially in places like your workplace.
Yes.
To be very rational about that. But generally, yeah. No, I don't think that just being an outsider automatically makes you a Satanist, but I think it will help you appreciate Satanism.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it becomes a facet of your personality, but it's not your total personality, It's, I have the same experience in my day-to-day life. I interact with all kinds of various people, and our beliefs or our philosophies or our religions or however you want to describe it don't really come up because it's not our purpose. We come together for a purpose. If we do end up talking about stuff and they happen to see my pentagram necklace or something that might give certain clue to it, we may strike up a conversation around that. But I agree with you. It's not my total identity. It is it's an aspect of my personality, but it doesn't define me as a person. Which kind of sounds sort of like what you were alluding to. It's not really it's an important part of you, but it's not. You don't like walk up to people going, "Hi, I'm Raul and I'm a Satanist." It's kind of like I am Raul, and if it comes up, yes, I am a Satanist, but that's not the whole purpose of our meeting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's Satanism describes who I am. It's just a part of who I am, and it's not something that I try to, project onto others and try to wave around with the flag. That's not the idea behind it. In some situations, like at Tiki Oasis, where I knew there would be other Satanists around, I did wear my Baphomet necklace. I did, kind of flash the colors a bit. But yeah, just a tiny bit. I try to be, in a convention of kitsch, and I was trying to be a little less. But I did run into other people who I did not know were Satanists. But they say, "Oh, hey, yeah, I know what that's about. That's cool that that you're here and you're celebrating this stuff with us, and I think that was fun, and running into a lot of people who knew what it was and knew what it meant in context of that kind of environment. So that was really interesting. I mean, that goes to show how much Satanism has grown away from just being, scary devil worship and into being a part of indulgence and a part of enjoying life. Well, all those things being a part of Satanism, that is. And that's where LaVey wanted Satanism to go. One of his last few articles that he published in the Black Flame, or in the Cloven Hoof, I forget exactly where, but he explicitly talked about what he wanted the Church of Satan to be and what he wanted how he wanted Satanism to go after he passed. He was aware that he was having health issues. He was aware, that there was going to be Satanism in the Church of Satan without him. And he explicitly said, he wanted Satanism to be less a theology and more of a lifestyle. And he did not want it to be something that was he didn't want it to see it as political activism. He wanted to see it as a lifestyle based on self-interest, carnality, and exercising, in exercising your sovereignty, and and enjoyment of life. That's what he wanted Satanism to go forward on. He wanted the Church of Satan to be a loose network of individuals that served as a conduit for those kinds of things. So, he didn't want the Church of Satan to be some organization of people who needed Satanism or who needed the Church of Satan for identity or as a crutch to get something out of. He didn't want people joining the Church of Satan to, get something out of it, to get goodies and a grab bag of things. He wanted people to join who felt there was a need for them to join in a productive manner, whether it's emotional, creative, or material in some way. He wanted it to be something that was creative and productive. And I keep on saying those things because I think those are the best descriptions of it. This is our one and only life. We want to make the most of it. We want to bring things into existence that have meaning to us, that apply our own perspectives to it, and that's best done through art, through music, through culture, but it could also be done professionally. It could be done academically. We work with a lot of academics, researchers, scholars, professors who try to cover the history of Satanism and how it interacts with other religions, with other cultures. And we also work with some lawyers and legal scholars and politicians and people who are in places of power that it would help to have an ear on what Satanism is and what it isn't, and protecting the interests of Satanists. Of course, we're not going to do that explicitly. We don't believe in doing that explicitly because we don't feel like that's the best approach, and we've had a lot of success being in the background, having the ear of individuals of certain people or groups, being in the background. That has actually worked, and I think we'll continue to do that.
Okay. So we got another question here from Loki's Witch. She asks, I do need to ask for one of us. I know that they are worried about their family going to say so. How or what is the best way to let their family know? So I asked for a little bit of clarity. So what she means is like people who are coming out as Satanists. Have you had any experience or yourself coming out to maybe your family as a Satanist? Do you know of anybody who maybe has had experience with that? Or
I mean, I can tell you my own kind of story about it. I think my family knew I was an atheist or not religious when I was a teenager. But what happened was it was actually the day after Columbine. The day after Columbine, my high school gathered up all the kind of misfits and outcasts and stuff like that, and they called them into the office to kind of talk to them. And then one of the kids said something along the lines of, it's like, oh yeah, we're Satanists and our leader is Raul. And that was like, that threw a huge flag, like, leader, what does that mean? And I was like, I never saw myself as a leader, but I guess people automatically saw that of me. I don't know. And they reached into his book bag, and in this book bag was like the Satanic Bible and things like that. And so they called me in, tried to pin me as some kind of ringleader of some trenchcoat mafia thing that was going around that people were afraid of. And they called in my parents, and my mom showed up, and they told her what happened, what's going on, their concerns, and they said, oh, he's a Satanist. You see, he's got the Satanic Bible. Well, people are saying that he believes in the Satanic Bible, and I said, yeah, I do. I actually do recognize it, and I do see myself as a Satanist. And my mom said something along the lines of, did he do anything wrong? Like, did he hurt somebody? Did he break any rules? Did he do anything wrong? And no, but, this is scary. And actually turned out the dean that was in charge of that, she was a strict Catholic, which I actually found out from another dean who was an atheist who thought this was all just bullshit. So, there was some politics going on around that, obviously. But my mom actually took out the card, for her attorney and said, okay, if you're going to have an issue, you can talk to my attorney. Otherwise, you need to let him go. And they kind of backed out at that point and said, okay, go home, take the day off, it's all cool down. And they never gave me a problem after that. At the same time, I was never a problem for them, really. But after that came the talk from my family as to what is Satanism, what are its core philosophies. And I actually did talk about the philosophy, and I did, look at the Satanic Bible with them, and there were some parts of it that spooked them. There were some, because there are parts of Satanism that are legitimately threatening to the herd. There are parts of Satanism that are legitimately scary for them. And I don't think that we should hide from that. I don't think we should be ashamed of that or try to, move beyond those kinds of things. If people are going to be afraid of Satanists, they should be afraid of them for the right reasons. And I think that my family, they recognize that, okay, there's some pretty, out there ideas out in this book and in this religion, but, you're actually not, you're staying out of trouble. You're obviously not a criminal, or you're not, some psychopath. So they kind of they took me on good faith that I was, productive, a good person, and they've always supported me. The topic of Satanism hasn't come up since then, but they come visit me. They come visit my home, my wife, and we actually did a satanic wedding. It was not explicitly satanic. In the Satanic Scriptures by Magus Peter Gilmore, there is a satanic wedding ritual, and I used that as the template. But I took out the word Satan and I replaced it with other things that were appropriate. But I think there were some people in the crowd that kind of were in the know, and actually the priest was a magister in the Church of Satan. He ordained the wedding, and we had it's on Walpurgisnacht on April 30th, which is one of the most important days on the Satanic calendar. So, for those who know, they kind of get it, but it was not explicit. So my family was still there, and they were very supportive of us. So, I am lucky in that aspect. I know that others are not so fortunate that they break ties with their families. They never talk about it. Right. I know there are some situations where people are going through divorce, and then they have custody battles, and Satanism is thrown around, and they have legal issues around that. It's not always so pleasant. I understand that. So that's why we do not require Satanists to be martyrs. We do not believe in martyrdom. If you need to hide your Satanism, if you need to lie about it, do it. Your self-interest is the most important thing. Do what's best for you. If other people think you're a God-fearing Christian, and that means that you get a promotion at your job, and that you can use those resources to, apply Satanism in the background, do it. Whatever it is that you need to do, your self-interest comes first. You're not, You're not backstabbing Satanism. You're not shaming. You have nothing to be ashamed about. This is about your life and taking control of your life and doing the things that put you in the best position in the long term. So I think that's what I would say to people who are looking to come out. Weigh that. Are you going to benefit from that? Maybe if you're an artist or a musician or a creative type, maybe it will come to your benefit to come out as a Satanist. You'll get the media attention and things like that. Try to do it in a tasteful way or in a way that will get you the right kind of attention. But otherwise, weigh the situation, weigh the cost, weigh the benefit, and figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I would absolutely agree with you because I would pretty much give verbatim that same advice to someone who wanted to come out as a pagan or come out as a witch. It's like, to who are you coming out to? What is the purpose of it? Do you think that they'll accept it? Or do you think they won't accept it? Or is it going to hinder you, or might it help you? And I think it is very important to understand who your audience is, who you're coming out to. And I think it's important to gauge that. Like sometimes your friends are probably the best people to come out to first. And they may even already know. And then from that point, it may be associates that you know at work, or associates that you know through your band, or other creative outlets that maybe other people who know. But then your family and your work, the work is probably the number one. Where it can cause you problems. Obviously, here in America, and also I believe in Europe too, you are protected for your religious beliefs. However, that doesn't mean that the boss might find like suddenly you're like not turning stuff in on time, or they might find other ways to cause problems and manipulate and get you out of there. They're not going to come out and say, well, we're firing you because you're a Satanist. They're not going to say that because they know if they do, they've got a serious lawsuit coming for them. But they might find other ways to make your life difficult and to kind of slide you out the door. So you need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how did were your wife's parents at the wedding? I mean, I'm assuming they probably were.
Yeah, they were.
They were to it.
Well, like I said, it wasn't explicit. If you were not aware of Satanism at all, like you would have thought, oh, this is just a really interesting wedding. They're talking about enjoying the carnal pleasures, and they're talking about, being two strong individuals sharing a path together to make the most out of life, and things like that. So they're like, oh, this is a non-traditional wedding. That's interesting. There's no mention of God or anything like that. So yeah, as an outsider, you may have thought like, oh, that's an interesting wedding, but you wouldn't have thought satanic. But if you knew what Satanism was and you heard our vows and you heard the ceremony, you would think, oh wow, they're talking about Satanism. And they're not saying Satan explicitly. They're not, talking about that, but you can see the implicit Satanism in the ceremony. So yeah, they did appreciate it. They always known that my wife was always a outsider. She was always, a strange one in a good way. So that wasn't very surprising to them. My family was always knew, they knew my background, but they also respected me as a successful, professional. I whatever my philosophies, whatever my religions were, it never hindered me or led me to a place of self-destruction or anti-life activities. So they recognize that whatever it is that he's doing, it's working for him. So they support me. So I think that's the approach my family took.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we should start kind of winding down a little bit because we're moving on almost 3 hours here, which is kind of long, and I have to actually get going myself. But there is a question here that came up, kind of like on the lines what we were talking about. As Nobi here asks, if to protect individual interests we are required to blend with the crowd, can it be argued that absolute individualism isn't possible? Any thoughts on how are those two reconciled?
In a way, I agree that absolute individualism is an ideal. We're getting into a realm of my personal opinion and my personal perspective on things. You know, in my opinion, I think true individuals are very rare in the world. I think that most people like the idea of individualism and they are attracted to individualism, but I think that I think a lot of people just end up being cookie cutter just by nature. I think most people are herd animals and they will herd up. I think Satanists are always outliers. I think Satanists are individuals, are individualistic, but I think we should also recognize the use of, you know, of being in an environment where you interact with other people, and sometimes the interests of others are in the interest of your own. So you may want to do things or promote causes that will benefit maybe this herd, but in turn benefit you. And the way I see it is in terms of, say, environmentalism. I know one Satanist is involved in environmentalism. He's on the board of an international organization that deals with environmental issues. And, you know, some would think, well, he's being altruistic, isn't he? Is he being selfless? Why, you know, he's trying to help other people. That's not satanic. And that's not true, because he's interested in the world is his home. He's interested in his home. He's interested in his environment. And so there is that kind of recognition of working with others so you can benefit yourself too, and also benefit your children. I know he has children. He's looking after them. You know, it's his legacy, you know, so it's not strict individualism. We're not idealists. I would say that actually definitively as a Church of Satan representative, that we are not idealists. We are realists. So, you know, we have these ideals that we may strive towards in some ways and use as models, but, you know, and we also have to keep in mind reality and seeing, you know, what we need to do realistically to achieve our goals. And in many ways, it is going to be working with others, working with the crowd, working with the herd, but always keeping in the back of your mind that you are not of the herd, that you are not like them, that you are separate. And that's not a bad thing too. You know, be proud of that. You know, use that to your advantage. And I think in that way, you know, you're both being honest with yourself and, you know, taking advantage of the environment around you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And I think it's important to understand that you kind of need to have that balance between the individual and the group, and sort of because there's self-interest in joining a collective or joining a group, but it's also in that exchange, like you had mentioned, we are herd creatures. We're social animals. We tend to come together for mutual gain, mutual purpose. And I think that there's again those two, that horseshoe aspect, where you can go to one extreme and each extreme is just as bad as the other, being too individualistic or being too selfish or being too selfless. If you are just giving away yourself willy-nilly, not expecting anything back, eventually you're going to get frustrated with that, because you feel like you're going to take on that martyr aspect of, oh, I give everything to everybody, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, but nobody really asked you to do that. You did that yourself. And then it can be the other extreme where you're just kind of like, you know, fuck you guys, I'm taking everything I want, and screw you. And then they're just like, okay, well, that guy's an asshole. We don't want to deal with him anymore. So, you know what I mean? So then you're going to isolate yourself. So you can go to either extreme. It's better to find that middle ground. You know,
Yeah,
don't give
we say
away yourself,
rational.
kind of like you were talking. Sorry, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right.
No, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
After a couple hours, it's kind of like, but yeah, sort of like what you were talking about, like when somebody comes to your lair and they're not respecting you, it's like, well, why should you respect them then? You know, then you can kind of like make fun of them and poke fun at them.
Yeah, and we say, rational self-interest. That's always, a semi-qualifier, because there'll be points where you run into counterproductive pride. And I believe that's actually one of our sins, counterproductive pride is, saying, F you to everybody and painting yourself into a corner and never admitting, your faults or anything like that. You'll never be able to fully appreciate life in that regard. And that's not satanic. We want to enjoy life. We want to take advantage of life and make the most of it. So sometimes it will lead to some kind of compromises. We do recognize a social contract. That as social animals, we do recognize a social contract in our societies. It's kind of a Hobbesian idea, but a state of anarchy of all against all, this war of all against all is not. Some people might find that, might have a fetish for that, might find that, kind of a sexy thought, but it's not very conducive to a stable, indulgent lifestyle. If shit hits the fan and that's a situation that arises, well, it's in satanic interest to be ready for that too. So, you always got to keep these things in mind, be realistic. What's going on in the world around you? If things get really bad and it becomes a jungle out there, well, be ready to tap into that animal spirit of yours and, survive in that jungle. But if that's not the case, well, try to make the most of the life that we do have, the situations that we do have.
Definitely. All right. I'm going to figure out how to wind this down. I think there's just one question, and I think we'll close after this one.
Okay.
Alexander Corley. Have you ever heard that name?
The names, I've somewhat recognized it, but I'm not familiar with his work.
Okay. The fairy religion mentioned, why don't you ask him about the Alexander Corley role in Satanism? Christianity needs to quit being stupid. So I'm not too sure. That doesn't really give me any context. I'm not too sure who that is. The name's not, it's not familiar to me.
I'm going through the chats, something about with Gnosticism or something like that. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the work of that person. I think Christianity is stupid in many ways, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to pinpoint what exactly that's about, but I know what Gnosticism is. I mean, I think that some Satanists would use some Gnostic symbolism and use that as a metaphor for other things, and the idea of Satan being the true ruler of the world. I think that is a very satanic idea, and I accept that. But I don't accept an actual literal Satan and a literal God and, the demiurge or whatever. I don't really buy into all that cosmology. I think that's fun. It's, fun stuff to play with, but I don't really believe in any of that.
Okay.
Wondering if that's a typo and he usually meant Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, you saw that too. Yeah, because I'm not too sure. That's such a broad topic. It would be hard to. I guess maybe if Aleister Crowley had much influence on Anton LaVey, I think you kind of touched on that before. Sort of that Anton LaVey kind of was a little influenced by occultism. A little bit. Maybe you could expand on that, and then we could start to wind down.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, Aleister Crowley was influential on LaVey in the ideas that he had about ceremonial magic. I think LaVey saw that there was that he was onto something in terms of the kind of the scientific application to magic, trying to understand it by applying some kind of a scientific method to it. And I think LaVey appreciated that, and he also appreciated Crowley's other like non-occult work. He liked his poetry and his just flair for living life. I think that was more influential on LaVey than anything else. I think people get hung up on Crowley as, you know, the great B666. I mean, he meant that as a joke. He said that to poke fun at, I think, some of the people in his social circles. He explicitly said that he was not a Satanist. At least I believe he explicitly said that, or I know his followers explicitly say that. So beyond just living an indulgent lifestyle and being a kind of pompous person and being just a powerful figure, I think that was influential on LaVey. The ceremonial magic was influential on LaVey. LaVey did borrow some of that stuff, the Enochian keys and stuff like that. LaVey took what worked, what he thought was useful, and he discarded the rest that he didn't think useful. Not all Satanists would agree with that. Some Satanists might find some of his ritual stuff to be more useful than LaVey thought. And that's fair. I mean, I know some people who are Satanists that are more interested in Crowley's kind of metaphysical ideas. You know, they come to it as a kind of as rational materialists, but they think there's something more to what he was doing. And if that works for them, that's great. You know, be your own person, you know, come to your own conclusions. You know, LaVey had set up guidelines, set up very useful techniques in his material, but, you know, feel free to pick from any sources that you feel are useful and stimulating. And for some, you know, Crowley might be more than others.
Yeah. All right, Raul, this has been wonderful. I always enjoy talking with you. You and I really have a lot of, at least from my perspective, we have a lot of things in common. When we come to a lot of these topics, so I find it very, engaging, and I really enjoy talking with you about these things. And, we'll have to talk offline again about, maybe setting up another time to talk. But, you know, obviously we'll talk offline about that. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we end this, or anything that
just radiofreesatan.com. Just check that out, because I work a lot on that, and I know a lot of people will appreciate the podcasts we have out there. We have music, commentary, politics, comedy, things like that. So that's radiofreesatan.com, churchofsatan.com. Search for our news feed there. Check out our live events calendar. Check out our the Black Flame, the magazine that we have up there. Check out Heathen Harvest. You can Google search for that, or heathenharvest.org. That's the website that I'm actually working on updating it. So in the next month or so, there may be a facelift to that website. I'm working on that, but you'll see my podcast there. There's a button there for podcasts called The Forest Passage. And you can also check out my writing on there. Just search for Raul and you'll come up with that. And Anarch, which is the music project that I'm working on. More to come on that. Not a whole lot out there right now. I tend to keep things to myself in regards to that until it's ready. But there'll be more in that soon. So I'll throw up a link. You could search for. I don't even know what to search for, but I'll give you a link that you can share. But there will be more news on that in the coming months.
Definitely, and like I did before, I'll take those links that you sent me, because unless there's anything new, I'll copy those links and put them below so people can explore. But it sounds like
sure.
Really go to the Church of Satan website, and from there you can really find a lot of that stuff.
So yeah, and you can search Church of Satan on Facebook and on Twitter. Notice that you'll see the verified check mark. That because I know that there are imitators out there that use the name and use our symbols, use our trademark symbols, and try to pass off as the Church of Satan in England, the Church of Satan in India, the Church of Satan. Like there's none of that. There's just Church of Satan, and there's just one. And you can verify it's us just by looking at the verification mark in the social media profile.
Aha. So make sure you're the real deal. Look for that. Look for that verified mark.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Raul, again, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. The chat has been very active. A lot of people talking back and forth. A lot of really great questions. So yes, we'll definitely see if we can do this again. So thank you again, Raul, and thank you all in the chat. And
all right, thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun, and yeah, I'm always happy to join you. Yeah, and thank you for the chat. Thanks to the chat. And take care and control.
All right. Bye-bye.